Hey there, I'm Linda Lukovic, holistic nutritionist and health coach. And welcome to Get You and Your Family Fall and Winter Ready, where we are going to learn natural approaches inside out so that you can thrive this fall and winter. We are talking about digestion from an osteopathic perspective.
Hi, I'm an osteopath. My name is Dave Ellis.
Dave is a manual osteopathic practitioner and has been successfully treating patients for over 24 years. He's the co-owner of Balance Point Health Centre in Oakville, Ontario. At Balance Point Health Centre, patients are coached to improving their health using holistic and complementary solutions in order to return the body to its natural state of health and vitality. Teaching and education is key so that people can play an active part in their healing. And you know what? I didn't do a good job introducing Dave, apparently, according to him. So he is going to talk a little bit more about his education because it's actually quite a huge time investment getting to where he is.
Thanks for skimming over it. I really appreciate that. Doesn't make me feel like you don't value me at all.
Just trying to be concise. People don't really
unlike my education, which was not concise. So I went to Sheridan College for 3 years. I studied athletic therapy. So I studied orthopedics for 3 years. After that, I did work I worked at high school, college, university, national, international, and professional levels of sport, and then went into osteopathy, which was an extra 7 years. Mm-hmm. How could you not mention that? I went to the Canadian College of Osteopathy. It was an extra 5 years of manual therapy training part-time, and then did a 2-year thesis. And then decided to start working, and I have been a therapist now for 20 years.
Yeah, and we joke about this, but it actually is a really big deal because right now in the field of osteopathy, there are schools popping up everywhere, giving out 1-year degrees that are all virtual, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
It's just a good reminder for you to make sure you ask questions, ask about the training. Mm-hmm. And what would you say the best questions are actually to ask an osteopath?
Well, I guess, first of all, where did you go to school? How long did you go to school for? Mm-hmm. Because my 7-year school is now a 5-year school, but there's also a 4, 3, 2, 1-year school. There's also a 6-month course you can take, which is insane in my opinion. It's terrible. It's the Wild West right now. So you may get someone who actually did a 6-month course. You can do a 2-year online course and then go in and do 2 weeks of manual therapy training. And you're an osteopathic manual practitioner. So it's really terrifying. When I went to school, this was the only program you could get into in Ontario, and they didn't take a lot of students. So, anyway, it's changed dramatically. Mm-hmm. Sheridan College is actually starting a program in September, which is really exciting, a 4-year honors Bachelor of Science. Mm-hmm. And I'm lucky enough to be part of that, creating some course content for that.
That's great.
So that's going to be really exciting.
Yeah. Sure.
So yeah, I take courses. I take around 2 courses a year. I've been doing that for 20 years. Continuing education is very important to me.
And to everyone at the clinic. That's definitely something that we all focus on because things are changing by the day. So, and
I always joke, people say, well, why do you keep taking courses? You went to school for so long. And I said, well, I didn't, absorb 140 years of knowledge in my 7 years of school. Mm-hmm. So you got to keep learning.
Yeah, always. So we are looking forward to talking about digestion from a very different perspective. We're used to talking about it from naturopaths, nutritionists, but now we're going to learn about the structural impacts of digestion.
Yeah.
And so Dave, do you want to start by just talking big picture about how what you do can help digestion?
Well, sure. It's important to look at things from a structural point of view because most of us have horrible structure. Most people who start getting digestive problems have been sitting incorrectly for a really long time. They kind of sit like this at work. They're slumped like this. It's not a very good way to work. And it ends up affecting how we digest our food. We always just think of the gut in the front and doing all the work, but the nerves that come from the spine are really important as well. A lot of people, around the holiday time, people complain a lot about heartburn because frankly, we're gluttons. We eat lots of food, we eat lots of rich food. We are having lots of fun sitting at the table, just enjoying time with everybody, but we're slumped or compressed. And what happens is that we actually make it harder for our body to digest our food. One of the simple things is that right here, you can kind of see it there, that's our diaphragm, comes all the way down to here. Our stomach is just below it. And when we slump and we compress, we're actually crushing our stomach. Stomach's a muscular bag. The stomach actually can get tight. So as we're jamming our food down there through all of our Christmas feasts,
It's very aggressive.
what happens as it's in there, it gets kind of stuck. And if the stomach is a muscular bag and it can't distend anymore, it can actually, that's one reason food will come back up and start to irritate because it's back up in our esophagus. So that's one of the things that can happen. The other thing is that as we slump forward as well, in our mid-back between our shoulder blades, where a lot of people have a lot of tension from poor posture, that actually helped to innervate the bottom of our esophagus, where we have a little sphincter down there called your inferior esophageal sphincter, which opens into the stomach. And what happens sometimes is that if the vertebrae doesn't move well, the nerves that come from the vertebrae don't function great, and that actually affects and impacts how that sphincter can close. So if it doesn't close, it allows gastric juices to come back up, irritate our esophagus, and can create problems.
That's interesting because even leaning forward like that, your body secretes cortisol, a stress hormone, and doesn't secrete testosterone. You'd need to be in power pose to do that. So you wonder if that sort of plays into it as well, physiologically.
It can.
Yeah.
And another thing too is that as you're talking about breathing, leaning forward, as we lean forward, we don't breathe well because it's the holidays. We're going to see family, so we're stressed. So we breathe very shallow. And there's a lot of information. There is information out there that shows that breathing shallow creates more of an acidic environment in your body.
Yeah.
So that's really important too, because you need to be able to tolerate your family's stories you've heard 100 times, or that relative you don't really want to be near, but you got seated next to them and you're very upset about that. You have to work through it, have good posture, breathe deeply.
Sometimes
so
you drink more.
Yeah, and
It impacts the liver.
you have to get through that meal. So you have to breathe deep, stay tall, be strong, and tolerate all their intolerances and all their horrible things they say to get through the holiday season.
This is what we call holistic health.
Yes.
It's not just about one simple thing.
No, it's my, when you go to dinner, it's the mental, physical, and spiritual part of it. You have to look at all of it to get
You
through
really
it.
do. You really do. That was a great example, Dave, of
You're welcome.
holistic health. So,
But that is important too, just to, in all seriousness.
Yeah.
So your diaphragm is very important. Breathing deep is really important because the diaphragm, it helps with all of our digestion, because the diaphragm it's a muscle, it's a muscular dome, and it pushes down and out. And it actually moves our organs up and down. So it actually helps with digestion. It pumps to the abdomen. It helps with transit of food. And it actually, funny enough, the diaphragm, the way it moves, it's attached to your neck through your esophagus. So if you don't sit tall, what happens is it's almost like, if you can imagine I'm wearing a tie, the fascia in the throat that goes through the esophagus into the diaphragm, if I have bad posture and I'm slumped forward like that, the distance between my chin and my abdomen is shortened. So the fascia that runs from my esophagus to my stomach is shortened. So the more I'm hunched forward, it actually shortens the esophagus all the way into the diaphragm, into the stomach. So by being nice and tall and open, you're actually opening all of this fascia. Because some people also that have gastroesophageal reflux can also get a lot of neck pain and headaches, because the head is in a forward position like this. So all of this shortens. As it shortens, it affects how those little muscles can even refer pain to the orbit, frontal pain. You can do lots of different things just with bad posture. So structure affects function. It's one of the keystones of osteopathy. If you have a good structure, function generally is good.
Yeah. So this is a perfect example of why we have the people we have at the clinic, because you do have to come at different issues from different angles, because it is so involved. Digestion is so complicated, right? Because digestion is also, if you look at it from kind of spiritual perspective, it's also about how you're digesting your life. Like your digestion slows if you're feeling like you're stalled in life and things like that. So anyways, yeah, lots of interesting connections to digestion. So it's interesting. I had a patient a long time ago who they couldn't speak their mind, and it's it's interesting. The job they're in and certain other things in their life, they were always swallowing their problems. They couldn't say what they wanted to say, and they had all this tension that just sat here. And they had some structural problems, but then as we talked more about it and this came out,
And once they addressed the issues that they had,
Mhm.
the pain was gone.
Mhm.
So even though, they were having something that seemed structural in nature, it wasn't truly structural, it was more energetic or emotional.
Mhm.
And once they talked to someone, through a professional therapist, and they got through that, then it's amazing that their pain left.
Yeah. So connected. It's so cool.
Mhm.
Yeah. So are there any other things that you typically see, Dave, in the fall or just after summer that you think
Um,
people would find interesting learning about?
there's so many things.
With Michael, we
Just-
talked about, the damage of wearing flip-flops all summer
Yep.
and one-sided sports.
Just to piggyback on Mike's idea, like that is very visual.
It was very visual.
Yes. So one of the things would be, one thing I noticed is that when it gets cold out too, people's stride changes. So I get a lot of people coming in with, they start getting hip pain, back pain, when it gets cold, because in the summer you're wearing flip flops or you're barefoot and you walk very differently. Because you're not thinking of slipping on ice or anything else.
Oh,
So
that's a good point.
your stride is very long, and so people are really happy. And as soon as it gets cold, stride starts to shorten. They start to get shorter stride length. Muscles start to get tighter, and they also switch to boots.
Yeah.
Mike probably talked about that.
No, he didn't talk about
Okay.
boots.
Boots are horrible because boots don't support you. Boots are generally, it's a very flat, the last inside the shoe, which actually, it doesn't have much of an arch. So it's usually generally very flat. Boots don't give any support. We use them through the winter. They make it harder, especially if you don't have a perfect arch. Your foot starts to collapse. It can affect the inside of the knee, the outside of the hip, lower back. So that's a whole problem. But it is amazing to see how everyone just shortens their stride. And then in the spring, they start getting other muscular problems. They start to lengthen their stride after having a shortened stride all year. So one rule or one suggestion I always give patients is, if you're lucky enough to travel south during the winters, take a tennis ball with you. Not for fun at the pool, but to roll your foot at the end of the day, because you're walking on sand. It's amazing how often your foot can get really tight and sore, and also you might have knee or hip problems. So just sitting down with a tennis ball on your foot, rolling it back and forth for about 5 minutes, unless your spouse wants to rub your feet, that's totally fine too, but they probably won't. So don't be disappointed, take a tennis ball.
Okay, that's a great tip. I think that's an awesome tip. Any other tips that you have for people to prevent injuries?
I have a million ideas. Do you want me to narrow it
Just
down?
one other one.
One other one. If you snowboard, well, it's more skiing, I would say. People who like to ski in the winter, make sure you stretch. You have to stretch really well before the season. Now, it's not just because of muscular injuries, but your legs are giant springs. So think of it that way. You're on your skis, you go down the hill, you're bouncing a little bit as you're going down the hill, and you go to turn. Well, if your pelvis can't move on that side, so if you're turning left and your right leg is your downhill leg, if you've injured your ankle in the summer, for example, and you never really got it addressed, it wasn't that bad, but it's still kind of stiff when you wake up in the morning, that means it's not moving properly. And you go to load that ski, what happens is that you can't absorb the impact on that side, and that ski is going to act differently. It's not going to feel as smooth. You're going to have that shudder. It's not going to carve nearly as well. And most of us usually have a side that we can turn on one side really well than the other. And generally it's because your pelvis isn't moving on that side. You might have had a previous knee injury or something else, but generally what I found in practice is that there's one side that doesn't move. So get it addressed. If you're having problems, if you had an injury previously on one side and you think, oh my God, that's right, I don't turn well to my right or left. It's something to look at, because it can make a massive difference in your performance on the ski hill. And, it can make for a much more enjoyable day, because you might also get really tired on that side. The ski, that leg may get more and more fatigued compared to the other side. You may just think it's weaker, but it could be the fact that you're not absorbing load properly, and the muscles having to work even harder to make you do that same movement on the other side.
Yeah.
So get it addressed and make sure you're stretching really well before and after, especially after, you're 20, you need to stretch after. I remember I went on a ski trip. I went on a ski trip with my friends when I was 40. I was the only one stretching after the day. They're like, why are you doing that?
Because we all think we're 20.
Yeah, I'm like, I want to ski tomorrow. I think I'm going to stretch today. And then they all got up and started stretching.
So be a good role model and stretch.
Yes, and know your friends.
Yeah. All right. So we thought we would talk a little bit about the SI joint. Because that is a common issue, right, in the fall.
Yeah, very
So,
common.
yeah.
So SI joint, it kind of keeps the clinic running because it's so dysfunctional. The SI joint is in your pelvis. So let me just show you this. So this is the back of your pelvis. So this is your iliac, okay, and this is your sacrum. So sacrum is S, iliac is I. So it's your SI joint, SI. So this little joint in here creates a lot of problems because what happens is your sacrum, when you walk, it turns left and right, kind of like the rudder of a ship. And the pelvis rolls forward and back. So one rolls forward, one rolls back, and that's how we walk in a straight line. A lot of times, this little joint gets stuck, and then you can't get up. You get stuck in flexion. You bend forward, you can't straighten up because every time you try to come back, the joints here stop moving, and that creates a lot of problems. And one of the reasons that happens, it's because of your butt. Your butt gets tight and it gets stuck. Muscles get tight and stop that joint from moving. And that's a real problem because a lot of patients will come in, they'll think they have herniated discs in their back. They'll have pain across their lower back. Sometimes it can even radiate down their leg. And they're like, I've herniated discs and I'm gonna need surgery and this is awful. And it is horrible because they're in pain, and who likes to see anyone in pain? I definitely don't. But what happens 9 times out of 10, or even more than that, basically what happens is that the SI joint is locked because the glutes get really tight. Your one glute muscle, bring this back in here, comes up from your femur into the sacrum, like kind of like that. And when it tightens, it actually turns the sacrum and it gets stuck and it jams that joint. So what we're doing in treatment is mechanically we're trying to fix how that SI joint works. If we can get the muscle to let go, then we can restore mobility back to the SI joint and it can calm down. Now, it's not only just the SI joint, it's the whole leg. So generally, it's funny, in the spring and in the winter, people shoveling. In the spring, it's funny. It's interesting because when they're shoveling, some people only use the one foot to shovel the top of the blade, and it pushes up into the one part in their foot, and their foot gets tight and locks. So when they go to step on that foot after they've done all their shoveling, their foot is so tight, the force goes all the way up their leg, and their back gets really tight and can create problems in their SI joint. But shoveling, it's just that when they come forward really hard and they go to lift that heavy load in the SI joint, the muscle is tight from loading the one leg in the front, like Mike was talking about switching sides. Just like with braking, you load the one side too much, the muscle gets really tight, you go bend down to pick up that snow, and it's like a game over, and you drop the shovel and you crawl in on all fours to the front of your house and try to wait for that pain to go away. So, that little tiny muscle in your glutes, your piriformis muscle, has a huge impact on how your lower back works. So it's really important to stretch your butt. Glutes can be weak. They might have trouble firing depending on what's going on with you. But generally I find it's more tension in the glute. It's gone into spasm, and then that blocks the joint. What I see. But the other people, you can't have weakness in any muscle depending how you run. Like even with, it's funny, just running, people who don't extend their legs, some runners are really quad dominant. So they just, especially people who run on treadmills, because I laugh because it's not really running, it's more bouncing. You're just bouncing up and down because the belt takes your leg and whips it behind you all the time. So you don't have to actively push yourself forward, which is why it's really not fun running in the spring when you get back on the road if you're not a winter runner, because you actually have to grab the pavement and shove it back. You have to push yourself forward.
Wow.
Right? Because you grab and you have to pull your leg through, where you don't do it on a treadmill. So people will find their glutes are tired, their hamstrings are tired, because there's so much quad work when you're bouncing up and down on a treadmill.
Cool. So tips for prevention?
Stretching. I can't really show you a good stretch in this little tiny screen.
Well, why don't we show it in the Facebook group?
Okay, we
Hop over to the Facebook group app.
Show you just easy stretches for your glutes.
Yeah.
And make sure your hamstrings also have really good length as well, because you're bending forward, so the back of your leg has to really lengthen so that you can actually perform the task you're trying to do. And just be smart when you're shoveling too. If it's heavy snow, don't take from the bottom of the pile, like kind of cut it in thirds. And that's what I do to save my back.
Yeah.
So, because it's just, there's no way you're lifting that load, and your chance of injury is much higher. So I like to think of it like a cake. I'm going to take a layer of each, because I like cake. So I can take a layer of each.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very satisfying.
Cake. Okay.
Yes, we should go get some.
We should.
Mhm.
All right, the interviews with one question, and that is, what is the first thing you do when you're starting to get sick?
Oh, I talked to my wife, and she makes it all better.
True story. Okay. So I'll share my tips in my interview. So you have to watch that one too.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks for joining us. And if you have any questions, make sure you join us in the Facebook group and we will answer them there. Chat soon.
Bye.